I couldn't believe my eyes when I walked out into my garden and saw it. 100 tomatoes. 100 bright red, plump tomatoes hanging from the vines. How did this happen? I had only planted a few tomato plants, certainly not enough to yield this many tomatoes. I stood there, staring at the abundance of tomatoes before me. I had always loved gardening, but this was something else entirely. It was as if the tomatoes had multiplied overnight, popping up out of nowhere. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I walked closer to the tomato plants, examining them closely. They looked healthy and vibrant, with no signs of disease or pests. It was as if they had been blessed by some magical force, allowing them to grow and thrive beyond belief. I started to pick some of the tomatoes, feeling their firmness in my hands. They were perfectly ripe, ready to be eaten. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of all the delicious meals I could make with these tomatoes. Salsa, pasta sauce, salads. The possibilities were endless. As I continued to pick the tomatoes, I noticed something strange. Each tomato seemed to be perfectly shaped, almost identical to the next. It was as if they had been grown in a factory, rather than in my humble garden. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unnatural about this abundance of tomatoes. I decided to do some research, trying to figure out how this could have happened. I read about hybrid tomato plants, genetically modified seeds, and even the possibility of a tomato miracle. But nothing seemed to explain the sheer number of tomatoes that had appeared in my garden. I started to feel a sense of unease, as if I was being watched. I looked around, but there was no one else in sight. It was just me and my 100 tomatoes. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something sinister about these tomatoes. They seemed to mock me with their perfect shapes and vibrant colors. It was as if they were taunting me, daring me to eat them. I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind, focusing instead on the task at hand. I continued to pick the tomatoes, filling basket after basket with the ripe fruit. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, I finally finished picking the tomatoes. I stood back and surveyed my handiwork, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But it was short-lived. As I turned to go back inside, I heard a rustling in the bushes. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained my eyes to see through the darkness, but all I could make out was a shadowy figure moving towards me. I felt a chill run down my spine as the figure emerged from the bushes. It was a man, tall and imposing, with a sinister grin on his face. He held out his hand, revealing a single tomato. "Enjoy your harvest," he said, his voice dripping with malice. And then he was gone, disappearing into the night as quickly as he had appeared. I stood there, staring at the tomato in my hand. It seemed to glow in the darkness, a beacon of danger. I knew then that I had made a grave mistake, that these tomatoes were not a gift, but a curse. I dropped the tomato to the ground, watching as it rolled away into the shadows. And then I turned and ran, fleeing from my garden and the 100 tomatoes that had brought me nothing but fear and dread. I never returned to that garden, never looked back at the tomatoes that had haunted me. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the rustling of the bushes, the sound of footsteps approaching. And I know that the man with the sinister grin is still out there, waiting for his next victim, waiting to unleash his 100 tomatoes on an unsuspecting soul.